very warm welcome. I was hoping we've constructed that jingle. That music is unique to us. Members of our team worked with AI to create a jingle for all our for all our events, and I didn't see one single person kind of jiggle to it or feel smiley. So we're gonna have to go back because it's meant to be optimistic and being able to raise the energy in the room, if you like. Pun not intended, as we are talking about energy today. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. This is one of these kind of annual things that we have, especially with the International Energy Agency, Fatih, and the Commissioner, to talk about energy matters. And it just so happens that, if we wanted any further example of the impact of climate change, it's 17 degrees today in Brussels. 17 degrees. And you've still got these deniers thinking, oh, it's great, we can have coffee and drinks on the terrace and enjoy, but actually it's not really climate change. Little do they know, and it actually will get worse. Can you imagine what Christmas Day and having a sunny day at 16 degrees, what will be like in Brussels? Will the penny drop then? We don't know. Let's hope. Anyway, my name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Chief Operating Officer and Chief Spokesperson here at Friends of Europe, and I have the privilege and the honor to moderate this conversation, which is about the outlook for energy in a fragmented world, in a fragmented landscape in particular. Just some points of reference to kind of punctuate the conversation. Yesterday, we witnessed an ugly truth of the reality of politics, where people were doing deals with the far right and the right to water down Europe's objectives. Europe was once, imagine, front cover of The Economist when the Green Deal came out. It said Europe actually is the global standard setter on, climate change and climate action. And yesterday, it's a travesty that it should be actually have a cloak over its head and be in shame that suddenly this has happened now in such a short period of time. But it shows you, doesn't it, when a world leader turns, let's say, rogue, and dismantle so much, what can happen in terms of giving energy and power to the right and the centre-right. And it's a clear reflection of what's happening right now, in that someone who doesn't actually believe in climate change has removed himself from the Paris Agreement and actually thinks we're just all being rather silly and we should get on with coal and gas, etc. But that has the impact politically. The second thing I think it's really important to remember is that that's the political context that we're in. What we do know is our demand for energy has grown exponentially. Exponentially. It's been ridiculous in the sense that we've, in the past 2 years, had more than we have over an average of a decade. Fatih will obviously talk more about that, but I think it's important to know that our habits of consumption haven't changed, or rather, the infrastructure to support our habits haven't changed. And on that point is, Fatih, you've talked about the age of electrification. We can, let's talk about that, whether that's really the case, because we've seen a 1% increase. That's fine, but the actual pace of electrification in Europe is miserable. It's absolutely miserable. And I'm not sure we can call it the age of electrification as a result, but let's see. But if we could get our act together, which I know it's also, Teresa, I know it's your issue about the grid and all the rest of it, but goodness me, if we could get some more connectivity and complete the single market for electrification, wouldn't that change people's lives and make everything much, much cheaper? And I suppose the other point is, and the final point, I suppose, is that we've learned in the past, there's been much more debate since the discussion with the Chinese, in particular, about how, 98% of Europe's supply of rare earth magnets come from China. They underpin our it's a digitalization transformation, if anything else. And I don't think the letter or the Draghi report made any reference to the fact that we have a supply chain chokehold on us if we want to be more competitive and strengthen our industrial base to be more digital. We can't do that if we don't have a deal with China. Or perhaps get real with the citizens of Europe and don't keep on talking about made in Europe as if you can turn the tap on globalization overnight, or you could change supply chains overnight. It's simply not the case. We need a bit of truth and reality in this, but you could have greater energy. I mean that in the both sense of the term, in terms of making sure we could work better, faster, and cheaper, in fact, if we had the political will and the mindset to do so. Those are my framing points for this conversation, both of you. So Fatih, I'm going to turn to you first. So the New York Times said, this is the most boring man that everyone wants to meet. Forgive me. forgive me, but you're not boring, but you're fabulous every time you present. So over to you. You can come here if you wish to. Okay, great. Yeah. Please.
So before thanking the Friends of Europe for hosting us, I wanted to come to this boring man story first because I don't want to stick to that to me. The New York Times reporter spent 2 days with me in Washington, New York, and at the end he said, "Now every world leader wants to meet you and this and that. Are you so entertaining?" I said, "I'm not entertaining at all. I'm just a number data person. If something, I am boring." But he exaggerated to make the most boring man in the world. So this is a bit of a journalistic exaggeration there. Now, but may I thank the Friends of Europe for once again hosting us here. Thank you very much. And I should mention it's a great privilege to be with the Vice President Teresa Ribera here. I had the honor and the chance of knowing Mrs. Ribera's almost 2 decades. In different positions she had in first State Secretary for Environment and in Paris, and being again the Vice President in Spain. And here, Teresa, may I thank you very much for what you have been doing for Spain, for Europe, and beyond. And I can tell you that I don't know your daily life, but definitely your life is not boring here. So I can imagine, and this is a very, very tough dossier you have. Now, what I thought is, in fact, yesterday I came yesterday and I had a great meeting with the President von der Leyen and discussing a few issues for the world, for the energy and so on. And the evening, a few colleagues are here. The Central Bank of the Belgium, there was a dinner. Some of the colleagues are here. I had discussions with them, and today again here. I would like to perhaps highlight 3, 4 issues I think might be important for all of us to know, based on, among other things, the World Energy Outlook we just reported, we just published. Everybody, as the journalists do, they have their own version. I wanted to tell you a bit what our version is there. So first, perhaps start with something which is not, in my view, not very nice as an energy person. Energy and geopolitics are interwoven since years, since decades, but I have never seen that they are so closely interwoven. I see in every part of the energy sector the dark and long shadow of politics, and this is not a good news in my view. I wish, as an energy person, energy remains as a part of the economy, but geopolitics is a major factor here. And looking at the energy world, geopolitics, who is doing what, I would say that the global energy security today faces unprecedented challenges throughout the energy sector. We had many energy security challenges in the past, but these now, currently, it is not oil, it is not gas, it's everywhere and coming from different corners. If I can give you a couple of examples. Oil, currently oil markets are fine, comfortable, as IEA has predicted, but there are issues, what will happen with Russia, Venezuela, Iran, sanctions, implications is one issue. Second, natural gas. Russia is a wild card here, and we are following. Maybe in Europe it is not very much seen, but it's a very important point, dear colleagues. Russia-China gas interconnections and gas trade is something for all of us to think what will be the implications, political implications of that in the future. Electricity, blackouts, we have seen in the last few years, driven by different reasons, not only geopolitics, but technical reasons and others. And an emerging challenge that we have been, as I raising for some time, loudly, concentration of critical mineral supply chains in one country. So looking at this entire energy picture, I believe it is not an exaggeration to say that the global energy security faces unprecedented challenges today. And the point is how the countries, governments, will respond to these challenges, at the same time taking into consideration other important and strategic policy goals such as competitiveness, such as affordability of energy, and addressing the climate change. Now, with critical minerals, if I may, I want to make all of us to understand that the critical minerals are not, and I hear that many places also in Brussels, are not necessarily used only for the clean energy technologies. They are used for everything. It is for the defense, it is for the AI, for chips, for manufacturing goods everywhere. And critical minerals, they have two components. One, mining the critical minerals out of the ground. This is one thing. Second thing is even more important, to refine and process it, make it useful. If you only dig a raw material here, it is completely useless. You can throw it. And why I'm saying this, today one country accounts more than 75% of the critical minerals refining capacity in the world. Without that country, you cannot do anything. I mean, recently you read news about the rare earth elements. This is extremely important critical mineral to make magnets, to make our industry, manufacturing sector, cars running. There were some export restrictions by some country. Today, 91% of the rare earth elements refining is in one country, and 9% everybody else put together. And in the World Energy Outlook that is led by my colleague Laura Cosi here, we found out that all the projects we have in US today, Australia, Canada, Malaysia, in Europe, there are many projects started for the rare earth elements refining, planned, started. If all of them planned projects will see the light of the day, this 91% in 10 years of time will go down to 75%, exactly, which is nothing. So this is a very important thing, dear colleagues. This is a very important. Europe had a bad experience of Russia, okay, in terms of gas, and we have to think how to deal with this issue. I have two other issues, and then I'll be very happy to hear and learn from Madam Vice President. It is about the electricity. Now, first, as you rightly mentioned, since a few years we are saying we may be entering the age of electricity. Electricity demand numbers are very high. But now, when I look at the data, I don't say anymore we may be entering the age of electricity. The age of electricity has arrived. It is here. Now, what drives globally the age of electricity and why it is very important, in my view, for Europe? When we look at the numbers, dear colleagues, just anybody can look at the numbers. You just need to, you don't need to be an energy expert. Just if you know 4 operations, you can look at it. The electricity demand growth in the world is growing at an unprecedented pace, incredibly high. We will still use oil and gas years to come. There is no question about that. But the electricity will be a driver. Why it is like that? Because in addition to the usual drivers, there are 3 important additional drivers now. One is the artificial intelligence and data centers. Now, artificial intelligence, in my view, can well be the most consequential technological innovation of humanity to date. And there is a rather, I shouldn't say use the word wild or not, maybe I don't use the word wild, race among the nations in the world. US, Europe, China, followed by India, Middle East, and so on. And this AI race, who will win it, will have a big power in terms of economy, political, foreign policy, etc. And it has three components, this race, who will win. It will depend on the number one, technology. Number two, regulation. And number three, it is my job, electricity. If we have enough electricity or not. Because you need, for data centers, 24/7 electricity. No question about that. And this, just to give you an idea, one medium-sized data center requires electricity as much as a city with 100,000 households. And data centers are mushrooming, big size, super big size, and all of the. If the country, region doesn't have electricity, they will be a few steps behind the others. So therefore, the technology, regulation, and electricity availability are critical to be a front runner for AI. So AI will be the one driver of the growth of electricity demand, age of electricity. Second is the electric cars. Whatever you read in the newspapers, you read them, but believe in the numbers of the IEA. I can tell you. Because sometimes the newspaper may say things that are not reflecting the real life stories. So 5 years ago, less than 5% of all the cars sold in the world was electric. And this year, more than 25% of all the cars sold in the world is electric. And now, I know and respect that some countries don't want to go electric cars. No problem. Everybody does what they want. Every citizen should do what they want. But the growth will come from China, Europe, but most importantly, Southeast Asia, India, Latin America. If you look at the electrification of cars rates in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, Thailand, you'll be surprised. Because they are cheap. Nothing to do with climate change, they are cheap. So this is going to grow. This is the second one. And third one is, drive of the age of electricity, is the big growth of air conditioning sales around the world, especially in the developing world. With increasing temperatures, you were mentioning the temperatures in Brussels. Brussels is good, but in Africa it is unbearable. In India, in order to have a normal life, people need air conditioning. This is a different driver. So therefore, we think electricity demand will skyrocket. The issue will be, with this demand, which technologies we are going to generate the electricity. We have different scenarios, multiple scenarios, and everybody chooses. We are lucky because everybody wants to see their own numbers. We have a number for everybody, so they can find whatever they want there. But on all of our scenarios, in all of our electricity generation projection, there is one winner in whatever the scenario is. It is solar. Even in our most conservative scenario, solar is the winner. So that's it. I mean, there is no question about it, because it's getting cheaper, and most of the electricity demand comes from the countries where you have a huge solar radiation. Okay, it is followed by others, of course. Still, natural gas will be used, and nuclear is making a comeback in some countries. I should also tell you that. My last 2 points, and I stop. I promise. One is an important topic for Europe, I believe, because we mentioned this 2 years ago, it is coming, and now again it came, which is a big wave of LNG, liquefied natural gas. So, dear colleagues, as we anticipated 2 years ago, as of 2026 to 2030, huge amount of LNG will come to the markets, liquefied natural gas, from US, Qatar, Australia, Canada, and elsewhere. Just to put in a context, this amount of LNG coming in the next 5 years is equal to half of what the world has built in the last 40 years. As it happens, these projects are finishing at the same time or similar times coming. So what does this mean? This means a few things. One, as we have said, and it is happening, there will be a downward pressure on the gas prices, which is good for importing countries. Second, it gives the importing countries, such as Europe, if they wish so, to substitute the gas they have from other countries. And in my view, I congratulated yesterday Madam President for the hopefully, and we have a member of parliament here, my colleague, I told him, I am looking very much forward to December, first week of December, to celebrate the end of Russian gas coming to this part of the world. This will be, in my poor English, we opened the parenthesis some decades ago, we are closing that parenthesis. It is very important. And this, the LNG, can be also helpful there. And third, markets will turn from the sellers' markets to buyers' markets. My fourth point, and I finish here, is on the climate change. I was last week in Belém, but before Belém, everywhere I see a rather, I would say, trend that I think many of you also see, that when we talk with the governments and others, climate change is sliding down as a top political agenda in the governments and the international fora. It is sliding down. And this happens at a time when we see, as we saw last year, the highest temperature increase in the history, exactly, and the increasing extreme weather events. So this is something we all have to bear in mind, because our scenarios show that compared to Paris 2015, where Teresa was one of the key players together with Lawrence and the others, we benefited from Paris. The world has benefited from Paris. We shave off maybe 1 degree or 1.5 degrees, but we are still on a path which is, in the most optimistic case, between 2.5 and 3 degrees temperature increase. So this is something that we all need to bear in mind. So I wanted to give a few things. That is because Europe is very important, but even important regions like Europe is not an energy island. There is a global picture, and I want to put this global picture because we have the master of Europe here. I'm sure Teresa will tell us more about Europe, and I stop here.
Bhatti, thank you very much, as ever. I think people want to applaud you. You can do that. It's okay. I have to say, of all the years I've been doing this with you, in the best way possible here, 5 years, that's probably the most, let's say, dim outlook you've given. And I think that's more reflective of the scenario that we are currently living through. And I repeat what I said. It's amazing how, when you have one of the world's most important, powerful leaders turns the clock back in terms of ideology and views on climate, we find ourselves in the place that we are. And I know that you're not, you are the IEA, you won't be that political in your statement, but you've given us a very dim outlook of where we are. But you also, I think, in there, identify areas where if Europe, and I'll come to Theresa in a minute, wanted to do something differently, it could. But it needs to have the political will and the political engine behind it to do so. So Theresa, it's good to have you with us. You have 3 really significant items in your portfolio: clean, just, and competitive, okay, as your kind of role. Given what we've just heard from Fatih, are these compatible anymore? Or do they seem to be incompatible pathways, especially when we think about what happened yesterday in the Parliament? Over to you.
Thank you so much. But allow me to, I will make 3 or 4 comments, some takeaways for Europe. But allow me to get into your provocation at the beginning, whether an energy leader is boring or not, to what extent this is politics or not. Because in fact, that made me think about something that I haven't shared, but probably Fatih remembers. 20 years ago, we met for the first time. We were the 2 of us members of panelists to speak about climate and energy. And then there was a moderator that wanted to please the audience. So to say that we count here on a Turkish economist. And I was at those days Deputy Director General in the Ministry of Environment in charge of climate. And a civil servant. Thanks God we don't have politicians, because these guys are going to solve everything, but they are technicals and there's no politics. And it was like a sudden revelation. That was the day that I decided that I could become a politician. So being inspired by a boring Turkish economist in charge of the economic thinking in the IEA. No, very honestly, yes, I think that it has always been the case. Of course, it is power, it is economics, it is quality of life, it's welfare, it's industry. It is so many things. But I think that even if we know many things, there are relevant points of concern in these days. I could make 3, 4 main comments on the we of this year, on the World Energy Outlook of this year, just to end with some takeaways for Europe. Yes, I think that you commented on this fact. We are already in the age of electricity, and this is important, this is good. It is the most competitive, clean and resilient source to power the world's growing appetite for energy, and we have the technologies, the facilities to ensure that it is increasingly clean, and that could allow to enter into different fields, but there will be these off-takers coming from AI, mobility, EVs, and heating and cooling that can help into this going up much quicker. And I think that we here in Europe have started to move along these lines. The data show to what extent it is growing fast, the electrification of the energy systems, but still far below from what we need, far below from what we promised, from what we committed to do. So in this new electricity era, our success will depend on how quick we expand and modernize our grids, and to what extent we are ready to count on the skills, the capacities, the services that ensure that this is a success. The second important message, you would have no doubts, is climate. I think it is terrifying the way there may be still powerful players willing to hide the drama, the impacts driven by climate change. And it is quite, I could say, a nonsense, because the energy discussion, the energy policy is the good news. Climate change challenge is good news to modernize the energy systems. There may be many other fields where things may be more difficult, challenging, unfair. But thinking in energy terms, it is very interesting what it could mean. So the world falls still short of Paris Agreement ambition. Many things have changed, and in fact, we are still not in that part of the systemic change that the energy systems need to promote if we want to succeed. This means that we are still waiting for a map to enter into the journey of transitioning away from fossil fuels. As Marina Silva was reminding me last week, whenever we want to start a journey, we need a map. And we still miss that map. When thinking about doubling energy efficiency improvements or tripling renewables capacity by 2030, we are still short. And we are entering in the last 5 years of this decade. So we need to accelerate. We know that this doesn't need to be linear. It can be an accelerated pathway, but we still miss that happening. And even in that context, yes, we could not expect that the traditional great ally in technology improvements, in modernizing the economy, in counting on the liberal order to facilitate peaceful development all over the world, did play so worthy in the energy and climate fields, not only, but in the energy and climate fields. But still, there is a large majority of citizens, municipalities, governors, and business community willing to come along with these very same lines in the US. So I think that, yes, we need to work on that, and we need to ensure that our voice are heard in a loud and clear manner. Energy is the easy piece when talking about climate, and we should not be making mistakes, pendular swings, and losing credibility, reliability, and even worse, losing the opportunity to invest in our own future. That drives me to the third important message, resilience and security, something that is also well reflected in the different scenarios and comments being made by Fatih and in the World Energy Outlook. Yes, access to critical raw materials, still a map is missing somewhere, at least here. Thinking on how we can ensure what the availability of what we may be needing, and thinking to what extent this could imply relating differently to the rest of the world in a much more strategic manner, in a much more, how to say, partnership approach. If we are entering into a multipolar world, I think that we need to keep our minds open to that reality, being tough and firm there where it is important to be tough and firm, but also thinking how we can build alliance and partnerships there where it is needed. And yes, there may be in some projections in the central scenario that the IEA projects a peak in oil demand around 2030 and a surge in LNG supply, but still with a footnote expressing that this means that we will still have exposure to geopolitical volatility and price volatility in this field. So resilience through domestically strategies, domestic approaches could be very important. Not to comment on cybersecurity, climate risk, and so on. So things that do matter in the way we plan and invest in our energy systems. My takeaways for Europe that go beyond the World Energy Outlook. I think that you were commenting on what we saw yesterday. I was really impressed. Because I think that, yes, the world is in a turmoil. But very honestly, sometimes I have the impression that we Europeans are ready to commit suicide. And that is something that both Draghi and Letta insisted on. Please, take a look to the outside world, but do also think on what we can do Europeans, thinking in Europe and in our own capacities. And what we saw yesterday was the opposite of that piece of advice. I could say that, yes, we need to think in terms of competitiveness, in terms of affordability, in terms of savings, in terms of industrial boost, in terms of politics and geopolitics. And we need to become a much more powerful political animal. And that means taking into consideration our own interests and principles, our own capacities, and the way we relate to each other. And not just thinking on our own and thinking how we can go to hand trophies against the green agenda or against the different political families. That is such a horrible mistake. 2 points of concern. I think that we made the right assessments. We cannot rely on what we do not produce. We need to take into consideration that we are in the middle of a big fight where there may be some fossil fuel laggards, and some electricity winners that have understood how electricity allows a much more broader economic and industrial position. And we cannot be in the middle waiting and see or getting these pendular swings. Now we want, now we don't want. Now we do a little bit, now we go backwards. Now we are courageous, now we are coward. We cannot afford that. I think that around the world, thinking in geopolitics and geoeconomics, I can recognize others making smart use of time opportunities. And we can improve in the use of time opportunities here in Europe. But we cannot afford wasting time. And there are also some that make a smart use of the power of disinformation, so to confuse our minds. And honestly, we cannot say that because we want to protect I don't know what, we prefer to come back to darkness, not to have a clue on what it could mean for investors investing here or there, thinking on transition plans to facilitate the decarbonization, or just hide the fact that we need to enter into that. So yes, I'm really worried about the European situation. And I think that it is not time anymore just to witness and confirm the facts. I think that it is time to take position and to say that we don't want to enter into this political and economic suicide. We need to be much more strategic in terms of how we relate to the others, and we need to be much more strategic in terms of how we can build along the lines that we know that we need. Of course, paying attention to social concerns, paying attention to the difficulties that we may find along the road, because we know that this is something challenging. Of course it is challenging, it is difficult. But the response should not be, let's forget about that, let's hide the problems, let's hide the reality and the facts, because we prefer not to do anything. Those could be my comments. Thank you.
Teresa, thank you very much. So, to a certain extent, colleagues, both our contributors have set the stage for a rather depressing conversation, but let's see what we can do. You know, one thing occurs to me that from listening to both of you, but also looking at what's happening around us, there's a sense that Nero is fiddling while Rome burns. No, seriously, think about that moment in time. There's really that sense that we are on fire, but our politicians don't get it. They don't see the urgency of it. At what point, and this is where I come back to you, Teresa, is that it's great, all that you said about the issues, but we are in a climate emergency, whether we like it or not. We are in a temperature emergency. It is a real and existential threat. Something like 365 trillion has been wiped off the books in GDP in the past 10 years or so because of the impact of climate change. We could turn that round. We know that actually if political leaders in Europe decided to do something tremendous like they did during COVID, to say, let's electrify or let's do a regional approach to electrification, it could have a significant impact. So is there a sense that, you know, Commission, let's say political leaders, are fiddling while Rome burns? Well, what's your sense of the politicians around you? Are they getting this? Is there a sense that there is a sense of moving together? And I'll come back to you, Fatih, in terms of, you speak to people all the time. Is there this sense that people are really, you know, it's wise words to say, oh, it's really bad. And, you know, you've got 100,000 folk meeting in Belém, COP continues, yet actually nothing changes. They meet, it's great, it's inclusive, everyone talks about diversity, fabulous. A lot of money, not a lot of action. So those are my 2 points to both of you. But first to you, Teresa, if I may.
Well, I think that there is this general feeling that, yes, the clean industry, the energy transition provides good opportunities for Europe, and the question is how we combine the different pieces. And yes, I think that we need to walk the path and to identify how we can bet on grids and come up with the grids package and find ways to invest in an earlier stage to seize the opportunities instead of waiting to see and then coping with the additional cost and the difficulties, and so on and so on. The problem is when we enter into the concrete discussion that there is this danger to enter into the very tactical short-termism move and to get shocked and frightened because of the difficulties to change all across the board the different things that we need to change. And this is where I think that we need to identify the different elements and not to miss the framing and the overall idea of why it matters. And this is why we cannot think that we can get into the grids package but forget about relevant information for investors, for instance. So the decision being backed by this new, new right alliance in the parliament. Because in fact, if investors are looking for predictability, reliability, deep understanding of the risk, you cannot say that you forget about these pieces of information and due diligence that could only apply for around 100 companies in Europe. The rest, we don't care. Oh my God, what is this? So yes, we need to facilitate, and that was a very smart move. In the past, we were leading that, and the others were adopting this because they thought that it was important, because we need to unlock the private capital, pouring their money there where it matters. So there may be some public orientation through regulation, through the risking, through taxation, through public procurement, through planning, that can help into this transformation. But the world is combined of public and private players trying to do according to the same rules, whatever they can. So I think that it is important to be consistent when dealing with the different aspects. I think that this we are now in this tricky moment where we still can have the shake to understand that we need to stick to the principles and update the tools so to succeed. Because it is there where we get the capacity to boost the economy, to create wealth, to modernize the industry, to create jobs, to be able then to provide the services of the welfare state, to be able then to be relevant in the international arena, both in trade and geopolitics. And I think that it is very obvious that energy on its own has the power, the capacity to build around all the different related policy decisions that could help into this field. My sense is that, in general terms, the politicians, I say that I decided to become politician because of this, the people in charge of the institutions, the people in the public institution responsible for the policy decisions still understand that. So the question is how deep we can go in ensuring the broader strategic picture.
Okay, do your fellow commissioners in the college get this point and the need to move in a more assertive direction? Because the council will play games, we know that, because of who we've got there.
Yes,
but as a commission body,
absolutely.
One Team Europe, are you moving in a direction that creates that sense of urgency?
So, yes, I think that the Commission is very much aware of our function as responsible to defend the European interests and the treaties, and that the European interests and the treaties right now mean going along these lines. And there, I'm positive. Then we get into a messy conversation with the Parliament, with the Council. The local interests or the very small interests of the different political forces and constituencies may make the conversation much more difficult. But yes, I think that the Commission is fully aware of the importance of this.
Okay, great, thank you. Fatih.
So first of all, I want to say that I did remember that the panel 20. I even remember the moderator, how he looked like. And
they're not talking about me, right?
No,
so
no.
I wasn't there. I wasn't a moderator. I wasn't in the UK. I was in the UK. So go.
I even made a joke there about Atletico Madrid. Teresa is an Atletico Madrid supporter. Nobody is perfect, so she's about that. But I didn't know that that panel provided a very good outcome that Teresa became a politician. So it's and there is a better outcome that I didn't become a politician. So this is even better, I think. So I am just following the politicians from a distance. And as you mentioned, I discuss with them all the time. But the question is whether the European politicians get it, is, I think, a bit of an unfair question. Because some European politicians get it, having a unity, having an interest, following the interests of Europe. Some get it, but a bit half and half. And some maybe don't want to get it and swim on the other direction. So to aggregate them in one group might not be a good analytical framework, as we say in our work. But what I believe, if in Europe, if we are able to have the unity and the clear strategy, we can change this, as you mentioned, this dim outlook, dim mood, because we have everything. We have the largest single market. We have a huge industry, know-how, 450 million consumers. The largest exporter of the world. So let's don't forget it. And there are hundreds of millions of people around the world that see Europe as a source of inspiration for their daily lives. Let's don't forget it. We need unity, and when we show unity in the past, 2008 financial crisis, whatever it takes, Europe went through that. The COVID crisis, again, Europe managed its act together and went through that. And the last one, the energy crisis after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with a lot of bruise here and there, but we were able to go through that. So we need unity and clear strategy, And I hope those politicians in Europe who look after the real interests of Europe win over the ones who are not very keen on this very issue. And for Europe, it is, as been said many times, I think these are very critical times, and I believe energy is, in these critical times, a very, very critical topic. And Europe has a lot of opportunities now to make the most out of the next energy chapter starting if Europe plays its cards wisely.
No, indeed, and I didn't mean to lump all politicians together, but the reality is politicians and politics will determine the pathway ahead of us. We know there's no unity at the moment. So whilst we want unity, it's not there. And it's people who are, you know, the 70% of the population in Europe out there that don't have the means that we have in this room are scratching their heads thinking energy prices, it's getting really hot, I've got older people that I can't care for, etc. and so forth, right? And that's what I mean about the notion of, Nero fiddling while Rome burns. There is a rage out there, which with the right is taking vulnerability of and taking sharp dialogue in, and people are genuinely frustrated about their bills and what's going on. And I think that there's a sense that we have the time to have a kind of a shop talk about, let's look at it in the sense of it's rosy and we'll get there, is perhaps not the case, because COVID felt like it was real because people were shutting their streets and etc. There isn't that dimension right now that the politicians get the need to move in that direction. But I'll give you both a breather for a second, because I want to bring the audience in, because there are a couple of politicians, you in particular, that I'd like to bring in. So could I get a mic at the front? You know I'd pick on you. You can't just sit here as an MEP and not be picked on this debate. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Pellerin-Carlin. I'm a member of the European Parliament with the Social Democrats in the ITRE and Energy Committee. What would you like me to comment on? The politicians fiddling?
Yeah. What's your take? I mean, you are of a different generation as a politician, right? And it's not just good, moisturize, you are young. And you've come into the movement in a particular way, right? And you represent a kind of different kind of approach in politics. How are you finding it? What's your reflection? Do you agree with the fact that, there's a sense that we're fiddling while Rome burns? And what's your take on what happened yesterday? Just share with us how you feel that reading the runes at the moment politically.
Okay. I've been a researcher for a decade. I've studied in the French army. I joined politics. I like the Italian saying. The Italians say "scendere in campo," so going down into politics a year and a half ago. But of course, there are people that don't get it. Here again, in Parliament, we have people that are praising Donald J. Trump, where when it comes to science, is the same guy that recommended that we should drink bleach to cure COVID. No, but this really happened. But I think there are enough politicians in the pro-European coalition that get it.
Okay.
And when you said what happened yesterday, I don't know what you're talking about, because there are two things that happened and they lead us to very contradictory political outcomes. The first thing where I was myself very much involved is the negotiation on the EU climate law. And the EU climate law that we got through Parliament is a genuine victory. It is really something good. The world is a little bit less unfair now that we have that majority in Parliament supporting that EU climate law. And it took courage, especially from the rational people inside the EPP. The majority of the EPP at the end of the day supported that law. And here we're talking about people that are politicians, that are facing all the constraints that we know, but they are people that are trained doctors, trained engineers, people with PhD, people who, even if they may not be familiar with the details of climate science, know that if we do policy in a way that is divorced from scientific reality, then we're not doing our duty as politicians. And so if you talk about the EU climate law, then we'd actually be hopeful. And we will find an agreement with Council, and it would be a genuine progress. If you want to look on the dark side, it's obviously the CSDDD.
Absolutely.
But the two things are true at the same time. And so at the end of the day, and I really want to be short for once, at the end of the day, what matters is the choice that the EPP will make. The EPP has a historical choice, just like center-right parties have been having such historical choices in the past. In January 1933, the center-right parties in Germany had a choice. and they chose the von Papen plan to put Hitler in power, rather than the Kurt von Schleicher plan to continue to have some kind of non-censorship coalition with the SPD in Germany. That is the choice that they make. The center-right in Italy in the 1920s made a similar choice. But a lot of center-right parties in the 60s and the 70s made choices for democracy. And so that's the debate happening in the DPP. One thing that gives me hope is the Dutch elections. Because it's not only about nationality, it's about different, like in the Netherlands, there are 3 parties that belong to the DPP, 2 main ones in those elections. CDA, which is a traditional Christian democratic party that believes in the European Union and that climate change is real, and BBB, which is a new demagogic populist party that was created to fight climate reality. If you look at what happened in the Dutch elections, CDA tripled the number of seats, while BBB lost half.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the example, and I hope that's the election the DPP will take, that by being conservative, that conserve their roots and their tradition, that remain Christian Democrats, that's the best way also for them to continue to do their political mission.
Okay, thank you very much. You did it in a... You didn't really answer... You didn't really answer my question, but no, don't worry, because you took the platform and you actually just gave us the analysis. But I wanted to really understand what your sense was of what's going on right now. And I get your research, but I'm not going to. I'm going to come back to the panelists here because there's something here that we haven't touched upon. And Teresa, you raised it about predictability of investment for investors, and that we need to create pathways back into the system in Europe to make sure the private sector is on board. Can you both say what you're hearing or you're learning from, okay, in the Europe experience of what are you doing to make sure that you're bringing the private sector, the energy companies and others on board and providing a framework of predictability? Because if you do that, more comes in, but also it potentially gets cheaper.
Well, I like very much the comments that we have just heard, because it is truth. We can be proud of many things that we have done, including the possibility to count on predictability towards 2040 with a relevant hook back to the international arena through the international carbon markets. I think that it is quite a strong signal, and I think that the business community requires this signal so that the investments that need long-term thinking count on a reasonable, predictable context, and I think that this helps into this. I think that this conversation with business is not only about a year or about a target. It is availability, affordability, and security of supply for the raw materials. It is thinking about skills and education. It is thinking about infrastructures. It is thinking about the cost of finance and the risk in those things that could be more innovative or riskier, so to reduce the cost of capital again. And I think that this is what we tried to provide with the Clean Industrial Deal, to have a broad description of the enablers that could facilitate a joint, consistent strategy for Europe. And I think it was welcome, and we need to decline the different elements that are identified in this piece of a strategy coming from Europe, and this is what we have been doing and what we will keep on doing. At the very same time, I was mentioning in purpose this smart use of time and smart use of information, because I think that these are the two aspects that in many occasions introduce complexity in any discussion. Smart use of time, thinking short-termism is becoming much more tactics and short-term wins, when in fact you may have the votes, but you may be jeopardizing the European project. Smart use of information or smart use of disinformation. So, yes, we know that it is 17 degrees today in Brussels. We know that we have hurricanes in the Caribbean, and that is the most relevant security thing for them. We know that this could be impacting also in our infrastructures, in our cities, in our welfare, in our crops. So everybody knows that this is the case. The question is how we use the information that is available, or we use the fear that exists so to hide the relevant information and to identify scapegoats on those that are trying to move. And my guess is that it is full of technical aspects, but this responsibility to stay firm and to be able to explain why and to fight against misinformation and to remind people that our function is also to provide comfort when there is fear is a responsibility of the institutions and the politicians. Because I can understand very well, and that was something that we have gone through, that coal miners or workers in a coal plant may be thinking, yes, fantastic, but how I'm going to end my mouth and what is going to be the salary and to what extent I may move or not. So that is quite human and quite fair. We need to think on the social policies that can come along, and we live in the best place of the world to think in those terms. And if we are convincing in terms of how we can provide comfort, it could be easier because we need the back of this society if we want to move so quick as we need. But if we fail in providing that comfort, if we become non-reliable because we are not thinking on not only big economic gains, but also social comfort, social policies, we may be feeding into the disinformation or the readiness to accept the most, how to say, reconforting message that this is the mistake or this is the fault of those saying that climate change, whatever. Let's go to the back. When coal was the best solution, everybody was happy. So I think, of course, we know what we are talking about, but I think that we need the technical layers to identify the best options to be combined at education level, energy, physics, infrastructures, skills, financial business, financial industry on one side, and at the very same time we also need to have this political capacity to be reliable in terms of the society being involved and feeling that this is something that could improve their way of life and not just count on additional burdens, complications, and changes that could be uncomfortable.
Thank you. Fatih, private sector. But also, can you, in your response, kind of loop it into AI developments? Because I think they're, from my perspective, they're connected. But they might not be, but it's up to you. But in terms of the private sector role, what are you seeing around the world? What should Europe do better in that regard? And the kind of the prospect of AI?
Yeah. So a private sector and predictability, they are two important issues for Europe, for everywhere else. Maybe I can make one observation that the energy sector is a bit different than the other parts of the economy because it is a very capital-intensive industry. I mean, you make an investment, it is a lifetime of 40, 50 years and requires a lot of money. So therefore, for the investors, for the private sector, it is important that they have a predictability. And they see what is coming, and you don't change the rules today and tomorrow again. And the investors are like butterflies. When they are scared, they just fly away. And they are not even as beautiful as butterflies. They fly away, and you cannot get the money. If you want to get the money, we have to give the predictability of rule of law, democracy, and the what is the pathway there, the incentives and others. Now, Europe, from that point of view, has a very important advantage vis-à-vis other parts of the world, but provide this right framework, investment framework for the investors, and giving a long-term vision to them is critical. For the AI, as I said, I believe it is a very consequential technology, and it is not only on our daily innocent personal experiences in our iPhones and this and that. It is, I'm sure many of you know better than me, it has huge implications for defense, for military, for security, and everything. And Europe, or let's put it this way, the democracies do not have the luxury to lose the AI race. If we lose it,
Exactly.
we lose democracies as well. So from that point of view, from my modest angle as an energy person, I only see that the two things: one, lots of electricity I need to push to put the companies and bring the companies to make them, to show them. I think there is recently in Europe, there was, I think, Alessandro or Laura, you were telling me about Google coming to Europe because we have to get them here. And the second one is how we can use AI in the right way to help us. For example, in Europe, Teresa also mentioned, and many parts of the world, we have a problem of grids, not enough grids. That's true. It's a big problem that we have raised as a blind spot of the European energy policy. We are building the power plants, which is very good. But from these power plants, you have to bring it to that electricity to the households, to the factories, the unit grids, and we don't have enough grids. A lot of power plants are just waiting to be connected, and it's idle. It's incredible. Teresa talked about the suicide, political suicide. For me, it's economic suicide. That a lot of power plants, which are already ready, cannot be connected. We don't have grids. But AI can help us to use the grids we have in the most optimal way. So this is another area that AI can be helpful. So how to make get the AI here and how to make it in the best way is an important point for Europe. But beyond energy, one last thing, AI will be, again, I am underlining, consequential for the defense, for political systems and everything.
Completely. It's a whole of society, whole of economy driver and impactful in those ways. I'm conscious that you've been very kind of quiet, and I want to bring you in. And I've got a taker already. Can I just ask if there's any of you from the private sector? I've picked up a politician already. Anyone from the private sector would really welcome a view. I'm not suggesting that you are or not, but it will take you first. Anybody else wants to raise their hand? Gentleman right at the back there as well. And then, so firstly here, I'm not going to take three men in a row. Sorry. So women, put your hands up, please, because it's important that we get that kind of balance of perspectives as well. Firstly, you, sir.
Thank you. I'm Sanjeev from the European Geothermal Energy Council. And what's fascinating in this whole discussion is that we already know what the answer, or that one word is, that binds all of the negativity and the positivity that we've heard here. So when Fatih and his excellent team produced their World Energy Outlook and the geothermal report last year, one of the things they noticed, highlighted very, very clearly, is that a lot of the people who are making money in the fossil industry are the skills that we need in the geothermal sector. So if you're looking for a transition, that is the answer. Going back to the politics, geothermal is the only technology we know over the last 12 months where you've had a parliament resolution with near unanimity. So even climate skeptics supported the technology. Energy ministers all produced council conclusions on geothermal. The problem is the Commission isn't honouring those calls to produce a geothermal roadmap and action plan to allow my members who are investors, our consumers, from data centre operators to social housing providers, to make those investments.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know, but I would like...
But you know, you read the rules, are you getting responses? You're obviously writing to the Commission and others. What are they saying to you? You can't just have been sat looking through the window and saying, please, Jamal Sierra,
I'm not going to tell you what we hear back, because that would be very rude, but it'd be very nice to hear from Teresa why the Commission isn't seizing the opportunity, making that smart move and that smart decision.
Great, thank you. Gentleman right at the back there with his hand up.
Thank you very much, Dharmendra. Reza Zain Joufrali, I am a space entrepreneur in Luxembourg, and I have a background in law and in impact investing. My question is simply, and complete candor, I've just come in the last 15 minutes, so if there's a bit of a repetition, sorry, I was working. So essentially, the question is who pays? Because there's already a lot of demands on states throughout the Western world. There is a forthcoming pension crisis, and now you're saying, okay, there's going to be a form of energy crisis, and indeed climate adaptation and climate mitigation should be top of the agenda because there's a huge overlap with defense. So, go on, yeah.
No, please, get to your point. Sorry.
So, first point is, who will pay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Anybody else who is a woman? Okay, no, I'm going to take this seriously because we take our credentials on this really seriously. If we have time, we'll come back to you. But I'll come back to both of you on the question that you've just heard. Whoever would like to, to kick off in the geothermal. What's your sense on the geothermal?
I can talk about geothermal maybe. So geothermal technology is, in fact, was with us several decades in Europe, in Asia, in the United States, and elsewhere. But the world didn't make a lot from this huge potential because we can use geothermal for heating and also for electricity generation. As was mentioned, we made a recent report on geothermal because some of the technologies that were used, like horizontal drilling, can be used for geothermal, for the advanced geothermal technologies, and this can help Europe a lot to make the most out of this. And we have a huge potential in Europe to have a firm and clean electricity source, and I hope that the right incentives are given to the investors, to the companies, to open the way for geothermal generation. I remember that the previous, it was Hungary before Denmark, during the Hungary's chair, there was a lot of emphasis, and IEA was involved in this geothermal discussion. So it is one of the options: clean, firm electricity and homegrown electricity. Geothermal, great potential there.
And in terms of the question of who pays, if you kind of get a sense of that question, do you want?
It depends on what.
I know, exactly, true.
Now, well, on different options, and I think that geothermal is effectively an option, and it is interesting, important, and maybe growing in the coming years. You know that from the Commission, apart from general calls and IPCIs and initiatives to support with our tools, it's obvious that we need to respect the way member states channel and decide on how to promote different sources of power generation or heat in their geography. So not so obvious what else the European Union or the Commission can do, but interesting to see if there is any additional idea. On who pays, very honestly, I think that this is probably very important, and I could say the short answer is everybody. And the most developed answer is how much depends, how much we pay, it will depend on how early we seize the opportunities and how fair the system is to ensure that through taxation, regulation, the risking through the public banking and other tools, the cost is lower. But I think that it depends very much on how skilled we are in terms of defining the ongoing changes through the different means. And the final comment is that the most direct positive experience that citizens and small entrepreneurs may have of this energy transition, the more chances we will have to count on a supportive public opinion to accelerate the transformation. So it is important that the benefits are experienced and identified, not only experienced, because sometimes we may experience and we do not recognize that we are experiencing the benefits. And yesterday I was seeing the data of Spanish electricity price in 2018 and 2025. And because of the solar revolution, it is much lower. But it is not sure that people connect
No, of course not. Yeah.
the facts.
Thank you. I have 9 minutes left, if that. Actually, I have 7 minutes left. But because I have to take this question because she's my chairwoman and she's sitting at the front, so I will privilege you. But if I can I just get a mic here, please? So you will be the last question. So sorry, colleagues, because I have to have a hard stop at 11:30 because I think the commission needs to go, and so does Fatih. So.
Damendra, I hope that it's not only because I'm a woman.
No, I said he was a chairwoman.
No, but well. And I'm not an investor. I'm a former politician, and I tried to work in the European Parliament at the time where we started the building of the Green Deal. So it's a long time ago, but a lot of things happened. My question is, how do you try to combine a single market and energy issues, particularly related to what you just said about the SMEs or the middle level of enterprises in the European Union, because of course it's the biggest part of the economic landscape in the European Union. And in addition, as you said, it could help to reconcile several small enterprises with citizens in order to let understand that, of course, there is a challenge. So my question is, Madame von der Leyen said that in 2028, a single market and different aspects of the single market has to be concluded. So that's 3 years. It's very short. Which are the steps that you can really try to promote in order to combine energy issues, not only the grids, of course the grid is important, but more than that, the support to the small enterprise companies trying to develop, circular economy and all those issues, in order to really maintain those enterprises in the European Union, sovereignty, economic sovereignty, but also how they can be an active actor, or more active actor in the single market.
Okay, great. So that will be the last question. But what I'd like you to do, both of you, is obviously the single market question is very pertinent to yourself, Teresa. But both of you, we know that we've got COP happening, we've got people meeting. What's your message to the people that are meeting right now, from a Commission point of view, from an IEA point of view, and specifically to you, Fatih? You made a reference to, beware of what happened with Russian oil and gas. And then you pointed out what the context is in terms of China. And I'm conscious that we have the Chinese ambassador. I'm not going to call on you, sir, don't worry at all. But I want to, you are here. But it's very clear that there's issues about how the kind of relationship Europe needs to forge with China if it's to succeed. But what's your view on that? So, Teresa, I'll go with you. Or do you want to go first? Would you, and I come back to you, Teresa, at the end?
I can just very
please.
briefly on the China issue. I mean, it is not a China. My golden rule number one when it comes to energy security is diversification.
Yeah.
You cannot it can be the historically best ally in the world, best friend, best neighbor. You don't put all eggs in one basket. You have to diversify it. With Russia, we have seen this.
Exactly.
China started this clean energy technologies much earlier than anybody else. They had a strategy, they had their policies, they had their incentives, and it is there. We cannot accuse them for what they have achieved. But what I'm saying is, we shouldn't be relying on one single country for very important issues. It could be, if it was Switzerland, I don't know if you have somebody from Switzerland embassy as well. If it was Switzerland,
We don't, but we have a colleague. Yeah.
I would say the same thing, because it is, you don't rely on one single country here, you diversify. It is the message I wanted to give. Give the time in order to give the time to Teresa to answer a more important question. Just to finish by saying that when it comes to clean energy and its growth, to be honest with you, whatever the numbers we look in terms of electricity generation, we see a huge growth of solar power. It is impossible, and wherever you look, it is because they are cheap. They are cheap, and it is coming. In the past, we were always saying there are many energy veterans here. There was always a word, a motto, coal is the king, king coal. Now, I want to change it, solar is the queen. You want to make the word. Solar is the queen, solar wins in terms of PG, power generation, and I think this is, in my view, a very important trend we all need to, we like it or not, we all need to recognize.
Thank you very much. There's a sense of like, there's a kind of evident reality of the fact that it's cheap, it could be made really quickly, and actually those who are meeting about them could really do something about solar. Teresa, last words to you.
No, I love this solar is the queen. And I also like something that has not come up, the fact that China may be peaking in oil consumption because of the electrification of their transportation sector. And this brings me back to the single market and the external dimensions. You say we cannot accuse China because they take this early approach on what energy transition may mean in industrial and economic terms. Taking into consideration this open mindset, staying firm, we need to think about that. Because that connects back to the single market and the interface between domestic and external policies. When we think about trade agreements, when we think about industrial policies, when we think about raw materials, everything goes, coming back to politicians, everything goes around climate, energy, environment, and social standards. So forget about the economy being disconnected of these things. We are not speaking about decoration in the garden. We are speaking about hard power, hard economics. And there is certain contradiction in this. Because we say, you Europeans are much more industrialized and richer, so you need to go first in decarbonization. And then, yes, we get relevant rules, clarity and predictability on our goals. We mobilize our resources. Our industries comply with these high standards, both in environment and social terms. Oh, you have such a nice single market that pays so well that we want to enter into your single market, but sorry, we are not going to comply with the same standards. This is new reality. And it may be fair to say, okay, this is a transition, you need to get higher in these social and environmental standards, and I can understand. But honestly, you cannot ask me to keep these standards to my industries and to allow you to compete in an unfair manner. So this interface, whether if we speak about CBAM, whether if we speak about deforestation traceability, the next nice package for the Parliament and the Council, by the way, whether we speak about trade agreements, we need to take this into consideration. So yes, in the single market, we may be thinking about the backbones in terms of infrastructures, about the simplification in terms of permitting, about the considerations of how much we can get into a 28th regime or the recognition of other member states permitting things. And we may turn back to the national governments to say, hey guys, a union is a union, not a complaint against the Commission while you remain very nationalistic. So I think that, yes, we need to comply with these expectations being raised by President von der Leyen in the State of the Union speech, how far we can be in 2028. But I think that in in terms of strategic thinking, we need to start identifying how we can break this difficult challenging of contradiction and different speeds in the domestic and the external policies. And that turns back to the competition policy, the foreign subsidies regulation, the understanding of the climate parameters. But I think that it is very impressive to see that, in fact, there may be many partners in the outside world, outside Europe, that understand when they realize that it is a contradiction, that we need to think differently and to join forces differently. So if you want to accede into the single market, it may be good to think about the type of conditionalities that you could need to comply with in order to ensure that we bring up the bar instead of going a race to the bottom where the single market disappears and the appetite to enter into the single market disappears because we become increasingly poor. No, on the contrary, we need to ensure that we go up. And to me, this is going to be one of the most challenging, interesting, exciting geopolitical settings and discussions in the time to come. But as I said, just turning the circle back to the beginning, yes, energy is very much interlinked with geopolitical, geoeconomics, and both energy and climate are not anymore something that can be treated in an isolated and local manner. This turns into every single discussion we may have. We have the strengths, the capacities, the strategic thinking, the skills, the business preparedness to be much more proud, to be much more ambitious, and to stay firm there where we need to stay firm, but to be open-minded and not arrogant there where there is a problem that we prefer to hide and to turn back to the essential principles of I don't know what to block action taking place on the ground. Thank you.
That's it, colleagues. That's all we have time for. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? You were far from boring, and you were far from just being political. It's great that we had both of you here, and obviously the conversation. I hope it's generated the kind of thinking that we need, and also a sense of asking the right question, because often it is about asking the right questions. Thank you both for spending the time here. But the reality is that there is an urgency, and I just hope that people get it. And as a reminder, again, I always say this, that the people that aren't in this room, the folk that are out there, the 70% that are not in the circumstances that you and I are in, are the ones that will be most impacted by change, and that will be the most impacted in terms of politics and political realities. So always use them as a conscience and a compass of our endeavours. Thank you both very much. Thank all of you for being patient and engaging. All I can say to you is look out for next week. On the 18th, we have a major, so we've talked about energy. Next Tuesday, we talk about digitalisation as a lever for Europe's success. So if you're interested, please log in and check in. So thank you all very much. Thank you, both of you.